Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and to today's video on the fairies. So who or what are the fairies? Fairies, otherwise known as the Fae, the fair folk or the little people, have appeared in many folklore tales and stories all around the world in every single culture. They have been portrayed in a number of different ways, good or bad, and it's hard to find anyone who actually agrees on what a fairy is or what they should or shouldn't be. But essentially, the general consensus is that fairies are nature spirits. They are the soul of the earth manifested into different spirits, energetic personas, characters, guardians of plants, trees, places, and just different forms of energy that make up the earth and the natural world around us. There are two main general schools of popular thought when it comes to the Fae. One of them is the very old school kind of menacing depiction of fairies. In a lot of ancient stories in Britain and Europe at least, fairies have been known to take children away, swapping babies for a fae duplicate of it known as a changeling, who can behave in very bad and destructive ways. And generally there are so many other stories throughout history of the fae just being mischievous, stealing things, and creating havoc wherever they go. And I think one reason for this dark side of the Fae that has been told time and time and again very regularly, I think is due to man's misunderstanding and perhaps fear of nature and the dark and unknown sides of the natural world. All things in nature must contain a balance of light and dark and this duality for them to be able to exist in balance, and the Fae have very much taken on the shadow side or the dark side of nature, the parts of nature that we don't understand and that mankind has historically feared. So the Fae have often in ancient traditional ways been used as the scapegoat for anything strange or unexplained that happens. And this fear of the Fae only increases with our increasing disconnect from nature, our increasing misunderstanding and detachment from nature. The more this happens, the more fear of the nature spirits will increase, because our knowledge and our comfort with nature starts to dwindle. This can only lead to further misunderstandings and apprehensions that many people may have when it comes to talking about fairies or working with them. This is very far removed from the other most popular school of thought when it comes to fairies, and that is really seeing them as the kind of sanitary, sterilized imagery that was popularized in the 19th century of little girls in dresses with pretty wings in nature, like little human girl butterflies, I suppose, sitting around being a very palatable commodity for 19th century Victorian England, I suppose, where the name of the game at that time was very much etiquette and ethics, proper morals and politeness. And so we have that very ancient traditional view of fairies being these dark, menacing, unknown beings, and we have the more recent Victorian popularized imagery of fairies being ever so sickly sweet and just being good little girls sitting in nature, very pretty and very harmless little things. These are two very narrow views of fairies that I wanted to get out of the way, because that is not what I will be talking about in this video. In this video I hope to present a more balanced viewpoint of what the Fae really are and how one can really work with them, because in reality the Fae are a combination of both of these traditional views of them that have been popularized, the light side and the dark side, but also mixed in with something else entirely, something spiritual, something otherworldly that humans as of yet have been unable to pin down as a concept that we can then popularize. Thus, this elusive element of the Fae that is very much a morally grey area, neither good nor bad, the supernatural and spiritual elements of the Fae, is something that is difficult for a lot of people to grasp and for a lot of people to understand, more so than the black and white views of them that have been popularised in the past. And this grey area is something that I really think is worth having a discussion about, rather than simply categorising fairies, putting them in a box of either entirely bad, dark and evil, or entirely good and pretty and light. They are a combination of all of these different things, as is nature herself, a combination of the light and the dark, along with pure vitality, pure life and pure raw spirit energy that we cannot confine to any box, any sort of morality, because it just is. So if the Fae are neither wholly good nor wholly bad, what qualities do they possess? Well, Brian Froud, the intuitive artistic genius behind the cult films of The Labyrinth, The Dark Crystal and the author of many books about the Fae, describes them as being in a constant state of flux and transformation. They obviously have no solid form like we do, and thus their essence constantly evolves into the best possible reflection of whatever their spirit is trying to express in any given moment. They are not limited to the confines of a normal physical body, and thus they can express themselves as any form depending on whatever mood they may have. This, I believe, lends itself to the playfulness, the mischievousness and trickery that we see in many of these old folk tales, because the Fae are simply free to express themselves, and they are liberated in ways that humans cannot ever be and humans cannot ever truly understand. As they are creatures of constant transformation and constant evolution, this is why they may be drawn to transformative times, either in the day, in the year, or in a person's life. For instance, they are known to be most present when someone or something is moving from one phase into another. For instance, a child into a teenager, or a teenager into an adult. They may have lots of Fae present around them at this time as they are transitioning and transforming into the next phase of their life, and they do not yet have a solid understanding of who they are yet. This is where Fae energy will be very present. And it is also said that the Fae like to appear at dusk, at twilight, when it is neither day nor night, midday when it is neither morning nor afternoon, or dawn when again it is neither night or day. The feeling I get from my own personal experience and from what I read about fairies is that they really relish these in-between times. They feel free in these in-between times and in these in-between spaces where they too feel at home, because they themselves are inherently that transformation. They themselves are inherently that state of being neither here nor there, and so they feel at home where things are not clear like that. Just like how with people it is very easy for us to define what and who we are, and as such we feel most comfortable in these little boxes that we can label ourselves as, or even in these little boxes that we call our homes or ourselves or our physical shells, and the Fae are in no way similar to that. There are many depictions, of course, of fairies appearing very human-like, with perhaps little hats and trousers and boots and cute little miniature versions of things that humans have. And I believe the reason for this is that A, it is easier for a human audience to that art to be able to empathise with the Fae as characters when we see our own selves reflected back in them in that way, and B, because I believe many of the Fae do actually like taking on the guise of human type attributes when we see them, and their reasons for doing so may vary, just as the Fae themselves are inherently extremely varied, from trying to imitate us as a way of flattery to mockery, making fun, or for just the pure curiosity of it, depending on the spirit of whatever fairy is doing it. But one thing is certain, and that is that we are no doubt a constant source of inspiration and fascination to the Fae, just as they are to us. In many ways, the Fae are the mirror through which we can see ourselves, and we are the mirror through which they can see themselves, as humanity is, of course, inherently linked to nature, and the Fae are the spirits of nature itself. We are linked to the Fae and they are linked to us, even though we may differ so much in the way that we perceive things and what our culture is, I suppose. So talking more about these cultural differences, this is something that is very important to bear in mind whenever one wants to work with the Fae or even just begin reaching out to them. The cultural differences between humanity and fairies are very vast. Just like if you're visiting a different country, you've got to be aware of the cultural customs and how to be respectful. The same is very much true of working with the Fae, except this is unlike any foreign country culture that you may have known. This is an entirely different thing, and so the fear that people may have when they're thinking of working with the Fae might be quite understandable, because it is quite a large, unknown and foreign thing to us. The culture of the Fae is vastly different to ours, firstly just due to the fact that the worlds we're living in these days are now so vastly different. The gulf between humanity and the Fae will only have widened since the Industrial Revolution, of course, and the introduction of more and more advanced technology, and all of these things that ultimately lead to a greater separation of humanity from nature that the Fae not only go hand in hand with but are fiercely loyal to. all of these things will have widened the gap between our cultures and between the way that we can understand each other. So that's one thing that is very important to bear in mind. Another potential cultural difference is that, of course, not only are they not confined to one physical form, which could lead to so many different ways of perceiving reality, but their experience of time could be entirely different, as has been demonstrated again in many historical tales about the Fae. Oftentimes we find legends of people who, when walking in the woods, got lost, accidentally entered the fairy realm, and stayed for 3 years there in human time, but were only there a few minutes in the fairy time. So for the Fae, time could pass much more slowly than our time, or just hold little meaning to them at all. They may not even have a concept of time, as we can perceive time as us growing older and getting closer to death, I suppose. The Fae constantly being transforming, time does not have that same meaning to them. Their perception of time must be very different to ours, as their physical forms are just infinitely more temporary than ours, just based on how often they change them, along with their loyalty to nature being very undying and very timeless and immortal, something that we have very much lost touch with and really couldn't be more different from general human society today. The third main cultural difference to mention is that the general consensus is that each individual fairy will live in a way that is defined by their own individual moral code. This is very different to our society, where we have written down rules, laws, that say what a general view of right and wrong is, which is then applied to every human ever via our legal system. So we as humans kind of have a group morality that we decide on and is then enforced. This is very different to the Fae, who are quite literally free spirits, and as such have no moral obligation or authority over them to behave in any kind of particular way. Some may just be more drawn towards malevolent behaviours, some may be just more drawn towards benevolent behaviours, but either way they're not going to face the consequences of their legal system like we would. And so this is where, again, a lot of the fear for the Fae from humans can manifest, because we know that they are under no obligation to abide by the rules that we do. There is no moral judgment for them, they just are. And so this can create a lot of fears and a lot of unknowns of what can I expect when working with the Fae? How can I do this to ensure that I am safe, because I don't know how they will treat me or how they will behave towards me. And indeed, this is most likely why so many folk tales issue so many warnings about them. So with all this fear that it is possible to have around the Fae, how is it possible to actually work with them and to move past that fear and to move forward in a way where you would feel more confident that you are safe with them? So whilst of course there is no one fail-safe way to ensure or guarantee that your experiences with the Fae will be positive, there are ways that you can increase your odds of having a positive experience based on what I and many others have discovered through trial and error. So the first thing to bear in mind is promises. So the Fae take promises extremely seriously, and so number one, I would recommend, if you make a promise to the Fae or any kind of deal with the Fae, please keep it, or don't make promises to the Fae that you in any way in your mind may doubt that you can actually achieve. The fact is, the Fae may just be more naturally fickle than we are, or they may just not have very much patience for us given all of the sins that humans have committed in regards to the earth and nature. But either way, a fairy's trust or patience is not something I would recommend testing in any way. Point number two is, if you want to get to developing a closer relationship to the Fae, you'll need to get closer to viewing the world in the way that they do, and as such you will need to really work on undoing some of the subconscious programming that you may have active in you, such as the view that the earth is just a resource for us humans to take advantage of and use in any way that we see fit, such as this very black and white view of anything really, of gender, morals, what is right or what is wrong. You need to get yourself used to seeing things in grey areas and being comfortable with that. Particularly the attitude of being able to exploit the earth as a resource and not really feel bad about it in any way is something that obviously, understandably, has led the Fae to be very distrustful of us, and so it is very much up to you to dismantle any of these old attitudes that you may still be clinging on to if you are serious about really bonding with the Fae and working with them on a regular basis. Along with dismantling these attitudes about the earth, that may also have an impact on your habits. If you have habits that may not be so kind to the earth and its creatures, such as eating a lot of meat, not travelling in very environmentally friendly ways, not being mindful about how you shop and how you consume, all of these different things. Whilst it is basically impossible, unfortunately, to exist in any way that is completely harmless to the earth. The Fae are creatures who are the guardians of the earth, and as such, if you want them to look favourably on you, this is really something that you're going to have to take seriously, is how am I contributing to this destruction of what the fairies guard, what their habitat is? How am I leading to the destruction of that through my habits or through my attitudes? And just reevaluate that, because the Fae will not look favourably upon you if you come to them perhaps asking for favours, while you're simultaneously demonstrating cognitive dissonance by not caring the earth that they spend their whole lives caring for. So when you're looking into the fairies more, one of the things that you might like to do just to ensure that you do have a positive experience with them is just by being mindful of the earth around you, not littering or perhaps picking up litter even if it's not your own, just to show the earth some respect and to show any of the Fae that may be watching that you are there as somebody who wants to help and not just take away from them. The Fae are understandably very reluctant and very tentative with trusting humans in general now, so if you do want to work with them, unfortunately it is something that you may have to accept that you're going to have to put quite a lot of work in to show them that you are trustworthy, in spite of all of the sins of humans as a species that we have already committed. We have to show the Fae that we are willing to undo some of that damage, even if it can only be a small bit, because of course we are just one individual in a sea of humanity. So if you are willing to bear that in mind, and if you are willing to put the work in, there is no reason why the Fae should not look upon you favourably and should not eventually come to trust you if you approach them with respect. So leading on from that point about respect, point number 3 for working with the Fae is to not have an attitude of entitlement or arrogance about you in any way when you approach them. The Fae are very proud of what they are, and they can be quite fickle towards humans, so they will not want to be treated as any kind of circus monkeys or magic genies or anything that is just there to amuse you and grant your wishes unconditionally. They have respect for themselves, and moreover, if you show that you do not have respect for them, they may play some kind of mischievous trick on you that you won't like. So definitely do not mess with the fairies in that way. You must approach them with a high level of humility and humbleness within yourself and a high level of respect for them and what they do. If you want to work with the Fae and you want them to help you achieve some kind of goal or to lend their energies to some kind of goal, you must make it clear to them that you are not expecting anything from them in an entitled, exploitative way. And then if you do that, it is far more likely that they will find it in their hearts to help you, because they know that you are a genuine person and you are not going to just take it for granted and abuse it immediately after they help you. Point number 4 about working with the Fae is that while it is important that you bear in mind these kind of more serious warnings about them and things to avoid, you must also remember that the Fae by nature are actually very surprisingly jovial. It is said that laughter is their form of music, and so whilst it is important to approach them with that air of, I guess, seriousness, humility and respect, we also have to keep an open mind enough that we can have that playful heart if they want to laugh with us. We need to be open to the possibility not of laughing at the Fae and what they are, but of laughing with them, and that is a way to strengthen this beautiful bond with the Fae where they feel comfortable to joke around with you, but not in a way that makes them feel disrespected. The really beautiful thing about the Fae is the many varied ways that they can show themselves to us to convey different messages. They love to surprise us, to be unexpected, and to show their shape-shifting selves to us in ways that will entrance and bewitch us. But if we wish to see that, if we wish to see that beauty that they can offer, we have to be open to whatever way they want to be perceived by us, whether that is through humour, sorrow, anger, or joy, or love. We must be open and appreciative to basically whatever comes from working with the Fae, as they are highly spontaneous and surprising beings by nature, and of course to even be able to make contact with them at all after everything that humanity has done to the earth is a privilege and an honour and should be treated as such. So let me know in the comments below if this video helped you. I really hope it did. I know there is so much to cover when working with the Fae, and I cannot possibly cover it all in one video, so please let me know in the comments below what I should talk about in my next video about the Fae, if I should make a part 2 to this video. Should I talk about how to actually see them for yourself, how to, as close as you possibly can, physically see them? Or should I talk about more of the myths and legends surrounding them and really delve into specific stories about the Fae? Either way, this is really a topic that I would love to delve into in more depth, so please leave your suggestions in the comments below. And I hope you find the Fae as fascinating and incredible spirits as I do. I really am so passionate about this topic, so I hope that came through in this video. As always, subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. Take care and blessed be everyone.